where were we? So about 2 weeks ago, we decided to endeavor on the journey of learning more about Warhammer 40k factions. Because I figured it would be really cool after getting to know the timeline, getting to know the different factions within the Warhammer universe, and seeing which ones we're inclined towards. To no surprise, it did end up being the Battle Sisters. Knowing that going into it that I probably do have an inclination toward the Battle Sisters. After watching that video, it did also seem like it was going to be the Battle Sisters. And was it the Silence? I don't know if I want to call them the Silent Sisters, but they were the silent faction within the Custodes. They were also really fascinating to me, but that just covered the entire Imperium. And Bricky had a whole second part about the other factions within the universe and the other races, including Eldar and Chaos Demons and every other good thing within it. I want to know more about the Eldar. The Eldar? The Eldar. That's probably how I say it. And that's the thing that I really, really want to know about. Oh, small little update. I did pick up this because we did go to a miniature store and we did paint our first miniatures. And I saw this, and honestly, this was the most like attractive Battle Sisters squad set, the Adeptus Sororitas. There were a bunch of different Battle Sister figurines, but I will say this, people do seem to be in agreement with this. They don't always have the best miniature collection. I think Bricky was right about this. Like they sometimes look like they could be a little bit more appealing than they actually are. But I think what I'm really sold on is definitely the armor, plus also the red and blacks is kind of sick. So all I need to do is acquire paints for this, and maybe I'll be on my way to painting my first set for Warhammer 40k. So that's pretty cool. Before we crack open that kit, we should probably check out this other faction video because maybe I might find myself interested in another faction. Let's do this. Let's dive in.
So after an entire episode of nothing but humans, we can now talk about chaos.
Ooh,
which involves
chaos.
humans again, but a little bit less. We also got demons and shit.
I just felt someone grab my ass.
What?
Like hard, Nick.
So, as I've mentioned many times before, we've discussed
he has
the
new legs. I
warp,
forgot that he did that trend.
The Imperium, the hellish landscape, the purgatory dimension realm between the material realm of our existence. Now, in the warp, it's terrifying,
I want to learn about
there are
the
demons
gods
everywhere.
as well.
Things are crazy. All your minds and thoughts and emotions get projected there. It is both formless and empty. It is vast and tiny. It obeys the laws of time and physics while simultaneously does absolutely nothing of the sort. It is a hodgepodge and a culmination of just unknowable, eldritch, horrifying shit. And there are 4 gods that permeate
tell me more about those
chaos
gods.
and the warp. These are the 4 major chaos gods. And if we wish to learn about chaos, we need to learn about each and every single one of these chaos gods. First up, we have Khorne, and he is the easiest. Khorne is your
so at least we can
Satan.
identify with.
He is all about
in terms
anger,
of like
murder, fighting,
exactly.
blood, guts, death. You ever heard the term
blood
for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne? That's Khorne. The whole idea is that he is all about the fury and strength
there are
of
more than
battle.
4
He doesn't
major
care
gods.
where blood comes from, so long as blood is flowing. He wants to fight and murder and carnage.
What if it comes from his other fellow gods?
Death. That is Khorne.
Or is there a balance between the gods?
Next up, you have Tzeentch, and Tzeentch is the god of change. However, the god of change, it's
honestly the way that Tzeentch is spelled, you wouldn't think it is pronounced like that.
Permeates in so many different other ways. He's the most eldritch of all the demon gods. He has this weird way to always be plucking at the strings of the universe. He's always conniving and scheming and doing his best to cause as much.
Something tells me he would be the one that would be making a pact with the Emperor or anyone that kind of wants to mess with things. Like if there was like a deal to be made with any one race and a chaos god, Tzeentch would like be behind it. And he'd be like, yes, yes. Like, I wonder, didn't the Necrons go to Tzeentch and Tzeentch said nah? Wasn't it him that said nah? He's behind the factions we fought in Space Marine 2.
As little bullshit as he can. Tzeentch is unknowable. Everything that makes sense, he will and won't do. Every future and setting
He's unpredictable.
and every type of,
he makes him interesting.
Destiny or fate is all
Thousand Suns
foretold
are
and
under.
also changeable. It is set in stone while also completely random. He knows what everything is going to happen and also that none of it's going to happen. You would ask Tzeentch a question. That question leads to 3 more questions. And those questions lead to the heat death of the universe, which asks 4 answers to those questions. And then he thinks to himself, what are questions even really? And are you
So either like the kind of energy he gives me is like, it depends on what his mood is. And it's like always like he's almost always infinitely like allowing the timeline and the possibilities to unravel in his mind. Like he's seeing all the possibilities and he's like basically pursuing all of them and none of them all at once. But he's also like kind of like a crossroads demon. You wouldn't want to make a pact with him, or you wouldn't want to make a wish, because like you have no idea what would come out of that, because he probably sees more to the details and like all these little threads than you probably have even conceived in your mind. Like, you know, when they say the human brain can only process so much information, and then there's so much that we can't even comprehend. Like we like might be able to like kind of conceptually understand, but like to wrap our head around, it's like, no, we have no like capabilities of doing that. It just makes us like inside. Tzeentch is like probably giga brain. He's galaxy brain.
Are you even asking the questions, or are you simply giving paths to
What
answers?
even are
and
questions?
Other
The
horseshit?
word questions
Tzeentch
is weird.
just
Say
I'm
questions
gonna
enough
fuck
and it'll
with
start to
stuff.
sound
He
really
is
weird. Questions,
yes,
questions,
and
questions,
he is no.
questions.
He is the understanding, and he is complexity. He is unknowable, and that's what the God of Change is about. Very bizarre, and he likes
Great.
birds a lot. I don't know why. Next up, we got
He likes
Papa
birds.
Nurgle.
At least he
Papa
likes
Nurgle,
something.
He loves you for who you are. Probably not. He will murder you just the same.
I
But
think
Papa
therefore
Nurgle
I am?
is about rot, pestilence,
Hold on.
death.
Sorry,
He
Tzeentch
will-
had me like
Papa
completely
Nurgle, and he likes birds
reeling a little bit about his concept.
a lot. I don't know why. Next up, we got Papa.
So he's like the
Nurgle.
Loki?
Papa Nurgle, he loves you for who you are. Probably not. He will murder you just the same. But Papa Nurgle is about rot,
So why is he Papa or
pestilence,
Nurgle then?
death, and decay. He is
Go
the
birds.
end of everything. Him and Tzeentch do not like each other very much, because where Tzeentch represents change and adjustment, Nurgle represents stagnation and death. He is all about miasma and pestilence and large
Awesome.
bloat.
Probably
and
has a huge
pus
swamp
and-
he sits
and
around in all day.
organs and people just being sedentary, sloth. He is the idea that everything will rot and decay and die. Nothing is certain besides decay and death. All
Honestly, if let's say these 3 gods that we got introduced to right now, Khorne, Tzeentch, and Nurgle, were to benefit, like they were drawing power like passively from the events happening within the universe, I feel like either Tzeentch or Nurgle would be the strongest. Because yes, you kind of have to entice blood to be spilled in war to be Khorne. Change is like something that is always constantly happening, kind of. But then decay is like ever so prominent, unless you're the Emperor. But he decayed a little bit, but still, Nurgle doesn't have a grasp on you. COVID empowered Nurgle. Like, Nurgle will never run out of power unless people all discover the power of immortality, or apparently become Necrons, where you're all made of like, what, you're like metal robots things. So maybe you aren't really decaying, but there should be other things in the universe that are still decaying. Nurgle is easy. He stops you suffering from disease. He doesn't stop you from having disease. He probably gives you a few more.
All of us will end up the same way, and broken down through just sheer never-ending decomposition. So the joke that Nurgle always loves you is generally because of that, because we all end up the same. We all rot, and we all die and wither. That's Nurgle, and he's got a general theme of course, pestilence and different kinds of diseases and sickness and things of that nature. That's generally Nurgle. He's pretty easy to understand as well. And
he probably wants people to decay faster.
Finally, we have the youngest of the Chaos Gods, and that is
this time it's
Slaanesh,
censored,
also
huh?
known as the Prince of Pleasure or the God of Unspeakable Excess. Slaanesh is generally referred to with sex, but it's not only sex. It's just that's a good avenue if you want to make stuff. Slaanesh is just the idea of the senses of the body being cranked to not just 11, but more like 17. So we'll discuss Slaanesh a little bit more when we talk about the Eldar, because they done fucked up.
I kind of want to know
But
more about Slaanesh. It's interesting.
it or whatever is mainly about just the excess of emotions. And therefore, sex is generally a large part of it. However, it's mostly pain and torture. Lots of pain, torture, but sometimes...
I feel like maybe the reason why sex is a pretty normal one to be thinking about is because sex is a pretty normal, amplified emotion that we experience, but like, you know, pain and things like that could also be amplified to that degree where people also enjoy it. But that's just a whole different territory altogether.
Sometimes sexually related or drug related. Lots of drugs. Slaanesh gets off on everything. Extremes in happiness, extremes in sadness, extremes in pain and sadism and masochism.
I think at least
and of course,
every now and
goes
then
along
people
with the
do
sex
extreme,
part of it as well.
experience some sort of
It's
extreme.
with sex because of the color scheme, very purple, lots of exposed genitalia. A lot of their models have like exposed nipples and stuff. And that is generally the theme you go for from a physical side, but it really embodies everything, mainly pain and also the excessive amounts of emotion. So when it comes down to it, you'll find a lot of them have things like spikes or whips or any kind of BDSM style gear because it is unspeakable excess. The Prince of
I kind
Pleasure.
of want to
Everything
see
in excess.
how
the
they're
point word is just
described in
sheer
like
frightening.
books.
That is Slaanesh in a nutshell. A little bit bizarre and a little hard to describe sometimes, but as we talk more about the Dark Eldar
The perspective of any of these Eldar in particular.
far better and far more than you'd want to. Now you might be thinking, why would anyone ever want to join Chaos? They all look horrifying, screwed up, and just frightening things, right? Well, the thing is that, of course, one, your mind is put into the warp and the Imperium, so you can be easily swayed by Chaos Demons.
Yeah, I don't think you necessarily have a choice.
Sometimes regiments of the less
The Whisperings probably are too strong.
whether it be civilians or, say, low-level guardsmen or conscripts,
Definitely not the
can
sisters.
be easily swayed by this and become
they would
Chaos
never be
cultists
swayed.
and stuff, and they serve their dark gods and whatever god they personally prefer. However, and this might seem strange, Chaos in their own right isn't necessarily evil. See, the warp
they
is
just
every
exist.
manifestation of emotion and being, every soul, everything of existence.
It makes sense.
This includes all the good things. All the different Chaos gods have another side to their coin. Khorne might be death,
flip
murder,
side.
slaughter, slaughter, but he's also got this weird sense of survival of the fittest, trial by combat, and honor. Khorne will never lie to you.
I didn't realize he had
Khorne
honor
will never stab you
principles.
in the back. Khorne isn't about conniving and scheming.
He's
Khorne
not
is
like
about
Sench.
straight up mono, you versus me, get in the ring, we're gonna murder each other hard right now. It may not be a good thing at the end of the day, but it is that other side of the coin. Him and Zeech generally don't get along because Zeech is that conniving schemer, but he's also about the idea of hope. Where there is change for your predicament. There is change for your problem. The hope of the galaxy, the ability to bend the world to your will, the idea that your fate is not set in stone.
I mean, that's
but a
also
reality that
attractive.
You control your own
It gives us
destiny,
free
you
will
control
and
whatever
choice
you want, the changer of
freedom.
ways. That is Zeech. And of course, Zeech and Nurgle hate each other.
Endless
because while
possibilities.
Nurgle does represent stagnation, death, and decay, he also represents finality and ending. The fact that you can be mentally at peace knowing that you will end and how you will end. Fear of the unknown, fear of change is not present with Nurgle. With Nurgle, everything will rot and die, and that provides that finality, that ability that this is over. We are all the same, and we will all end the same. We know the meaning of life. The meaning of life is to
immortals,
live
though.
and die and rot. And with that, it brings peace of mind. Slaanesh is a lot more simple. While they are the excess of emotion, they are also the representation of emotion. Slaanesh embodies happiness. Slaanesh embodies excitement and joy and pleasure, not only in the sense of the physical, bam style of pleasure, but also everything else like food and drink and air on your cheek and sunlight, the feeling, emotion and feeling.
Yeah,
all of that
highly
is also
attuned
represented
to
with
everything
Slaanesh.
around you.
So you have to ask, why are they always represented as super evil skulls and spikes on everything and want to murder everybody?
I mean,
I don't really got an answer for you on that one. My assumption is that because mentally humans may think worse thoughts even if we don't act on them, and therefore they're projected in the warp more. That one's a little bit weird. I don't know. This is me spitballing.
Maybe it could be because the warp is such a strange area, and to exist within it, you kind of are like twisted within. Like maybe the only way you can exist within it is you have to be able to induce more chaos into the world. Like, would the warp exist if there wasn't all of this? We learned about, was it the Eldar, the Dark Eldar that went too far, and like everything, there was like a storm that basically occurred, I believe, to some degree out of the warp because of how far they went into the chaos in the world. I don't think anything within there could survive without having the nature of wanting to maintain, preserve, or even propagate the chaos of the warp and maybe extend it further beyond. Used to be more peaceful, like way back. Could it be that these gods could have been actually not bad and peaceful, and that everything within was really chill, and it was our perverseness, our desire to colonize and expand within the universe and like surpass like death, like the Necrons and stuff like that, and all these kinds of things that basically made this place so perverse? And then now we're just like, oh my god, it's so terrible. But it's like kind of just an outcome of our existence. Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird one, that's for sure.
Balling right now, but I don't know. You need a super bad guy. You already got the Imperium of Man. You need somebody to be a little bit worse than them. So you got demons. Honestly, who cares? I just want to buy like a bird magician. Look at him, so cool. So combining all this together, on the tabletop, Chaos Demons are generally very melee-based. They run in, go really hard. You have lots of summoning and conjuring, tons of spells. Generally a little bit frail, but they have special saves to make them a little bit stronger. You've got giant demons and smaller demons. You got hordes of little boys and tons of big guys. Demons are as they seem. Demons. Nurgle is slow.
Yeah, they're relatively easy to
Khorne is super scary in melee. You've got Tzeentch, who are far more into psychers and spellcasting, and then Slaanesh, who is all melee, really fast, but squishy, but in lots of hordes of tons of melee and
cool.
pain damage.
I like the distinctions
so
between
overall,
the hordes.
demons are a huge part of 40k and a massive threat to almost every single faction, with the exception of a couple. However, the big part about demons is also transferred into the other 9 Primarchs we didn't talk about, which are the Chaos Space Marines.
Okay, here we go. Chaos Astartes.
So Horus and all of his boys, all of them in the Primarchs, they have all also become Chaos Boys, and they all have their own special Chaos Legions, specializing in so many different things, just like the Adeptus Astartes, the Angels of Death, the regular Space Marines. Chaos Space Marines aren't a whole lot different than the regular Space Marines. They have the same armor, generally the same training and toughness. They just specialize in different kinds of things. And also a lot of the Primarchs have ascended into greater demons? They're demon Primarchs at this point. Gigantic, horrifying man-demon hybrids that are pretty...
What kind of benefits do they get by being demonic Primarchs? Like, we already know Primarchs are pretty beefy boys. Like, do they get even more like specialized because of that? The warp is affected by the emotions of the universe, so everything is awful. The warp is awful, I think. That would kind of line up Blitz. You can't be killed in the material plane. So hold on. A demon Primarch cannot be killed in the material plane. Is that why the Emperor had to take Horus into the warp and then delete him? Like, so he beat him in battle first, and then he's like, zip into warp. Now you're dead. Now you're poof. I kill you where you reside. If a demon dies in real space, you just go back to the warp. Right, but doesn't anything that generally dies, even just like normal material plane things, also go back to the warp? The Emperor used psychic powers to rend his soul to dust. I don't know, that's a good question. Was Horus considered a demon when he died? I'm still kind of like reeling from the concept of the warp, and like it poses a lot of interesting questions as well. But if your soul went there, you'd be fed to the demons. Wait, how would you know if your soul goes to the warp or you go? Like, what's the difference? If his demon soul goes back, he's just angry. You mean a human soul? Wait, are we just demon food?
pretty awesome, if I'm gonna be honest. They look really, really cool. But them and their associated legions that they are a part of are all kind of going out there and causing a large ruckus for everyone else. Considering the raw strength and firepower of a legion of Space Marines, imagine that entire legion just converting to chaos and immediately fighting you. It's generally pretty horrifying. There's a lot of them, so I gotta write them down. But you've got the Emperor's Children with Primarch Fulgrim, loyal to Slanesh. These people, they are some messed up people. They're just sensory over. These people, they are so.
There's like actual heads hanging on the armor back here. You might not be able to see that very clearly, but I do. It's kind of behind chat. They look like pygmy heads or something like that. But I can't tell if they're regular sized human heads. Wait, if this is a regular sized human head, how the big is this Primarch? Oh, jeez.
Messed up people. They're just sensory overload. Tons of drugs, tons of torture.
Those
and
eyes.
I think Fulgrim is a demon Primarch right now. And oh god, I am terrified to see what that man looks like. At least on the tabletop, because Emperor's Children are not good people. You've got the Iron Warriors, which are kind of like opposite of the Imperial Fists, with Primarch Perturabo, I believe is his name. They're Chaos Undivided. They just kind of serve chaos in a general aspect instead of choosing one of the four. But the Iron Warriors are
I
big
didn't know
on
you
the
can
siege
serve it
and
in general.
fortification, and they're basically entirely against the Imperial Fists and are a major rival. Perturabo, I believe, is also still alive, and I'm also very interested to see what he looks like, because Demon Primarchs are badass. You've got the Night Lords with Primarch Conrad Kurz. Conrad Kurz is dead, which
Night
is good,
Lords kind of look cool.
But the Night Lords are generally about terrorizing people and terrorism. They're generally about fear.
Cool
and
concepts.
Rightly so. You've got the World Eaters with Primarch Angron still alive. Also excited to see. Angron, if you think you've known an angry person, Angron is the angriest son of a bitch you will ever know. Angron removed parts of his brain that didn't make him angry, so he could be angrier. Angron. Fucker's mad.
So if he sees like a little kitten and it makes him feel things other than anger, he would just get rid of it. That's just terrifying. He just needs things to fuel his anger, not things that curb his emotions at all. Imagine he was called Tim. He's just angry. He'd be angry because he was called just Tim. Night Lords recruited prisoners and murderers into their ranks and believe if I wear my enemy's skulls as a codpiece, it will demoralize allies. That is terrifying. That is truly terrifying. Oh, there was a face stretched across the shoulder of the pauldron we looked at earlier. Oh my god.
You've got the Death Guard with Primarch Mortarion. They actually have their own special codex and their own major army on the tabletop. Mortarion himself is actually one of the models, and look at him.
I like the color scheme.
Look at him. It's so cool looking.
Yeah, it does.
Of course, Nurgle
really
based,
cool.
Obviously.
Interesting
so very slow,
eyes
but very
and
tanky. You've got the
wings.
Word Bearers with Primarch Lorgar. Lorgar is, I believe, still alive. I don't know what's up with him at the current moment, but the Word Bearers are generally the people who caused all the major problems in the beginning.
Closed captions will not be able to keep up with their weird names.
Assholes. You got the Black Legion with Primarch Horus. Get fucked, nerd. You've got the Alpha Legion with Primarch Alfarius Omegon. Chaos.
They look like they have water scales on them.
And then finally, you've got the Thousand Sons with Primarch Magnus the Nerd. Thousand Sons also have their own
See, this
book,
one we know
just
about.
Death Guard. Magnus is also a tabletop model. He looks super cool, as you can tell, and they're all super heavily psyker and kind of Egyptian themed. They look pretty neat.
I do like the Egyptian theme. The Egyptian theme was pretty sick. It was also cool to see those within the game.
But overall, with all of these Chaos Space Marine factions, you can play as a lot of different ones, but the main ones that you can really work at are standard Space Marines, Chaos Space Marines, as well as the Death Guard and Thousand Sons, as they are the most fleshed out, especially on the tabletop at least. See this right here? This is a really good way to describe the Chaos Space Marines. What the thick-headed fools with their broken corpse of an emperor fail to understand is that not only can they never defeat us, but they cannot hide or flee or shield themselves from the triumph of chaos. They are finite and we are unbound, undivided. They must not err, or they shall fall to heresy. All who fall join our cause.
They seem to be very cognizant
who dares to open his eyes
about their ways prior
recruit.
joining chaos.
They strive merely to hold back our fury and might, and it consumes them. Thus, you can see chaos is inevitable. We lurk not only beyond their grasp and at their gates, we lurk within the darkness of their souls, on the tip of their tongues, in their tortured dreams. We are them, but freed from the shackles of ignorance. We are them,
That's
grown
fair.
strong, evolved. We are them.
I can see
but
wanting
so
that
much
freedom
more. As
from like the
hardcore
Imperium.
As that quote is, the saddest part is they're mostly right. Chaos is basically unkillable. You could probably get rid of Space Marines, a decent amount, the Chaos Space Marines that is, but every soul that dies goes to the warp. Every Chaos soul will end up back in the warp. And depending on how hard you killed them, they will come back at some point. Every demon you banish will...
I don't know. It sounds like this is, I know it's going to be a really heretical thought. Sounds like this is the way to win. Like literally just become chaos and then you'll just always return back and you'll always be stronger in numbers and I don't know, it just feels like they will be infinite. We lost her. I don't know, there's definitely appeal. Heresy. Hey, I gotta explore all the factions. I have to entertain all the thoughts.
Will return at some point. Chaos is unstoppable. The warp is unending. And while maybe there is at some point some
eternal.
way to stop them somehow, the resources
as well
to do
known.
so, the requirements to do so are so far beyond the reaches of man and the other races at the current moment that really
to avoid
it's
the
just
inevitable.
an unstoppable force that just keeps on coming and is just barely being slowed. Chaos is by far the biggest threat. They are without number, their legions are everywhere, and yeah, they're pretty scary.
Fetch the flamer! Sisters do not fall, stand strong. One of us. Come on. You have to give me some little wiggle room here. In the way, you're right, like chaos when nothing left, then they starve and die out. One cannot live without the other at this point. Yeah, I mean, there is a point that equilibrium and harmony needs to exist without there being alive, like, forces or races within the world and not, like, flooding towards chaos. Then maybe there would be nothing really there anymore.
On with humans now. Let's talk about some Xenos.
Ooh, the Eldar. Tell me more.
So let's talk about the Eldar, or also known as the Eldari, which are
very
a super
Guardians of the Galaxy looking
hyper-specialized and
appearance.
very technologically advanced race of, well, elf people. They were, as well, responsible for the creation of Slaanesh, the newest demon
Thanks,
god.
Eldar.
How'd they do that? Debauchery on a world-ending scale. So back in the day, it was just Khorne, Tzeentch, and Nurgle. And the Eldar are very,
I like that
very
one just
ancient,
entered the ranks.
millions of years. These Eldar, however, have a
But
bit
it was
of
the
a
Eldar
sensory
responsible for
problem.
creating a new
You know,
problem.
every kind of pain or feeling that you have is a little bit amplified compared to the normal. However, with Eldar, as their race advanced so excessively, and they became so self-reliant, and everything became so easy, there was no requirement for
So it was
food
boredom.
production anymore. There was no shortages. Everything was basically done.
was a perfect
Everyone
world.
was so comfortable. And that comfort breeded this weird sedation. And that sedation breeded the requirement for more and more debauchery.
Debauchery!
Debauchery! Debauchery! When everything you have can be so easily acquired, you will end up down this
This is
road
exactly
of
like
pure debauchery.
when we think about the super wealthy. The super wealthy in our universe are basically the Dark Eldar.
All of the senses the Eldar had that were so powerful, things like feeling, happiness, sadness, and just evil and good, all needed to be satisfied and satiated. And the desire to satiate these senses grew more and more with worse and worse debauchery. It started off with things like sex and drugs becoming so much more rampant because of these are the first things you generally turn to when requirements
I wonder
for living
if
are
the
so
drugs would be
easily
different than what
accessible.
humans
It would get to the
perceive
point
drugs
that
are.
made Sander Cohen in BioShock look sane. All right, this is the kind of debauchery it led to. It was constantly satisfying and satiating these sexual and sadistic or masochistic
How many times
fantasies
can you say
that
sexual?
only elevated and elevated, and this was species-wide. People started going down darker,
I mean,
more depraved,
species-wide, but doesn't
and
mean
more
everyone.
violent paths as time went on. However, some people didn't entirely take to that. Some of the Eldar were looking
I think also like maybe even serial killers could be like described as like people that pursue this like really weird, like heightened state of like being where they seem to like understand things in ways that no one else can comprehend or put themselves in the shoes of, because it's like so unbelievably warped. Maybe that's what it's like to enter the head of the Eldar. Like you can't have anyone like map their minds because it just gets so weird and wacky in there. The drugs are insane. I think a friend of mine gave an example once and it's like really insane. Yeah, I mean, if they're so like attuned to their emotions, I'm guessing like the low tier like drugs that humans would use, they would probably feel nothing. It would be like not even like a prick of like change of emotion. Asmodai takes Repent to the next level. I'm curious who Asmodai is now.
At this depraved species that they had become and said, no thanks for me, dog, I'm good. And they bailed. These are the Craft World Eldar. They left on these giant continent-sized starships called Craft Worlds. They believed in learning the old ways of the Eldar and pushing away from this depravity and debauchery and going back to their main roots. And so they would segment themselves on these giant craft worlds far in the outer reaches of space. They even had this thing called the Webway. Remember what we mentioned about warp travel with the Imperium?
Yeah.
Well, the Eldar had something way safer called a Webway. And the Eldar Webway is actually like a...
So why did the Emperor never try to talk to the Eldar and figuring out how to manage space travel? Could there have been a way? Because it feels like, I don't know, if there anyone to, because aliens are bad. God, his xenophobia will not allow him to actually learn from the Eldar who learned so much. Because he wanted his own Webway TM. I think because they were lost, the Eldar that like decided to travel so far? Yeah, I understand they're xenophobic, but that just feels like it's counterintuitive to your entire race. Learning in this galaxy? No. I didn't mention learning, did I? That would be heretical. It was pleasure derived from anything done excessively. If you were a crazy philosopher constantly honing that craft, you'd still be given to Slaanesh once it became a bit much. Oh, so it's like, what's his face from Lord of the Rings that crafted the rings, but he fell to the excess and he went a little wacky and wild because of Sauron. What's his name again? That was probably excess. No, not Smeagol. The guy that crafted the rings. The elf. The elf that crafted the rings. With the influence of Sauron. Ones that made the rings of power. Ah, you know what I'm talking about. Celebrimbor! Thank you. That's what I'm thinking of. Celebrimbor. Yeah, he's the one that went a little weird. But Smeagol was probably weird in another way. He was obsessive weird. He was very, very into that ring. But I think that's just the nature of the ring. But Celebrimbor.
Pocket dimension kind of thing. And in that pocket dimension, there were also more horrible, depraved groups and clans that would spend their time in there. And if you imagine the debauchery was bad already, these were debauchery X10. So all of this continued, and it continued
all
and
over
it
the galaxy.
Until Slaanesh just burst forth. All that emotion, all that mental, well, thought processes, I suppose, all of this in such a condensed space. Don't forget, this is all being shot, all their souls as well, into the warp. All this depravity right into the...
I mean, I guess if they're having these really weird like coliseums where they're fighting each other for like the pursuit of like pain and battle and stuff like that, they probably are dying at such a rate that it's like injecting all this like weird energy within to the warp and it just spontaneously formed. But okay, question. Does two things. Does the Warhammer universe have several galaxies or is it just the one? Like, are there other galaxies? And two, is there only one timeline or is there any alternate timelines within the Warhammer universe?
So what happened? Boom! Slaanesh was birthed and killed off 90% of the entire Eldar population. Untold trillions had their souls ripped from their bodies and their actual fleshy bodies devoured by Slaanesh demons. The entirety of the Eldar race was eaten alive and their souls consumed to the Prince of Pleasure.
Just for fun? For funsies? Like, okay, but was that like just... Are we talking like the Dark Eldar that basically caused Slaanesh to exist or the Eldar that didn't pursue this path? They just really like dopamine. Slaanesh loves soul food. I can see that. I understand now. She woke up hungry. So that's just like if ADHD was a god. It was just the Eldar at that point. There was no Craft Worlds or Dark Eldar. Okay, all right.
All of them got fucked up. It was so bad that it literally ripped a warp hole into the fabric of the materium
Because
called the
how many
Eye
died?
of Terror. That's literally this like quasi-horrifying gateway portal from
So we
the
should blame the
materium
Eldar
and
for
the
all of our
immaterium
problems.
right next to Cadia.
Ah,
And it is horrifying.
dang.
So this Slaanesh, also known as She Who Thirsts by the Eldar, slaughtered the
Say it, you
entire
coward.
population except for a couple. Those in the craft worlds were actually not affected by this as they were so far in the reaches of the galaxy. That crazy crap
Dang.
that birth
Smart.
of Slaanesh only affected the ones in the center. So these
Smart.
craft world Eldar
They,
were
like,
able
knew
to
what was up.
escape,
They left.
but Slaanesh got their sights on them. Every time an Eldar will die, their soul doesn't just pass into the warp naturally. It goes straight to Slaanesh.
Oh,
Craft
dang.
world or not. What about those people in the webway?
Oh,
Well,
dang. That's
imagine that
pretty messed
giant
up.
birth happening, but they were only able to just barely get a grasp onto you. Slaanesh was just barely able to hold on. These people are the Dark Eldar, or also known as the
Drakkar.
Drukhari. The Eldar population right now is so massively small. It is minuscule compared to any of the
Maybe
other
that's why
most
the Emperor's
of the
also
other
never reached out to them.
in the universe. The Eldar are consistently
Ooh, I like
having
the
issues
armor.
trying to get their population
That is cool
up
armor.
because as their souls are constantly being hungered by from Slaanesh, they realize their entire species is doomed. And they understand it very well. Since the time of the fall, our race has been haunted by what we, in our reckless pursuit of hedonistic indulgence, gave birth
Please say
to.
it, Medits.
Though our dreams once overturned worlds and quenched suns, we are now but fitful shadows clinging to the edge of existence. All the stars in the sky cannot blot out the hateful glare of the red moon's eye. The birthing
Red
place
Moon's
of
eye,
the great
Slaanesh?
enemy pulses with all the malice of a demon that is dreaming, casting its shadow over all we have ever done and all we ever shall. Every twisted strand of fate and casting of the runes leads me to this time, to this place, and it is clear that the final battle awaits me at the ancient Crone worlds, a conflict
I
the
don't even know
likes
what the
of which
Crone
has not
worlds
been
are.
seen since the Monkai warred amongst themselves and their corpse of a seer fell to his traitorous son. Is coming, and all my steps lead towards it, no matter
this is a
that I
massive
walk
monologue.
other paths. I see the stars stained red with the blood of the Monkai, and though their wars do not concern me, I would gladly let them destroy one another. I know that to avoid this fight is to condemn my race to inevitable doom, and though all I see is darkness, I know that I will not flinch from my destiny. And now let's talk about cute plastic models.
Bro, I'm straight up
Okay, Monkai are the word for humans. They're basically calling us monkeys. I see. So that's what they mean by warring and blood and across the stars. I got it now. So basically, don't murder bang a god in existence. Yep, that's kind of the price that they have to pay for all of eternity. That does make sense. Warhammer has sci-fi 40k timeline and the fantasy age of Sigmar timeline, but I'm not sure if 40k itself fragments much. Okay, yeah, I totally forgot about those timelines. You were right. Thank you for that reminder. But it is just one galaxy that they are contained within. Good to know. Thank you for that.
not having a good time.
The first playable race we have for the Eldar are the Craft World Eldar and living in those Craft World starships I mentioned earlier. And each of them have their own kind of craft world, almost like a Space Marine Legion. Each craft world is in itself its own special kind of group. And the Eldar themselves are very fast and rely a lot on trickery. They are squishy, a bit weak, but they're very in tune as psychers. Tons of psychers across the entire Eldar population.
That makes
and their
sense, considering who
weaponry
they are.
and abilities are fast and extremely hard hitting, but of course rather fragile. Understanding an Eldar's brain is an exercise in futility. They are all over the place.
Wait,
in
can they
confusion
also be
and
taken over by
trickery
demons
on
'cause
a
they're also
whole galactic
psychers?
scale. They fight weird, they think weirder, and Eldar in their own right
Fight
really
weird
rely
and
on this to
think
keep their
weird
species alive.
is a tactical
they need
advantage.
to think about deception and the strangeness of what they do if they truly want to not be immediately murdered and slaughtered wholesale thanks to their entirely small population. However, I must say that it seems like
Fair.
their population is getting slightly
Preservation.
better. These craft worlds hold millions upon millions of people. And as they continually, reproduce and have their craft worlds expand, losing a few people in battle, while hurts a lot, they aren't really losing what's extremely precious to them. It's not like every single death means the death of their species. It seems like they're kind of on the upturn a little bit. There's still a doomed race being
There's
sucked
still a
into
chance
Slaanesh
for them,
every
huh?
time someone dies, but they are definitely doing a little bit better than they were before. Eldar are fast, cunning, and what they don't make up for in
Kind of a smart decision here by the craft world Eldar, otherwise we probably would have lost them all at once altogether. The old world planet was once stuck in the Eye of Terror, which means fantasy took place in 40k at some points. During the end times, the planet was destroyed, so all Age of Sigmar likely takes place in the Eye. Oh, so it kind of does be a little bit separate from the entirety of the universe while still being within the same timeline.
tankiness, they make up for an extremely advanced weaponry. They also call humans Monkai, which is something I mentioned earlier. That is a derogatory slur for humans in the Warhammer world. Why is it called Monkai? Well, it's because you can't, in your game, call people monkeys. On the tabletop, exactly what I said. Not very tanky,
Sure.
generally pretty
don't like
squishy.
the blue,
hit
yellow
like
color scheme.
trucks and move at Mach 5. Fast, hit hard, die fast. Exactly how it
Not
sounds.
the
They've been good
coolest
for a very
models,
long
I will
time,
say.
too. We bring only death and leave only carry on. It is a message even a human can understand.
Oh dang, the mockery.
Eldar. So, Drukhari. Let's talk about the
Ooh,
Dark
I want
Eldar.
to talk about that.
On today's episode of How Fucked Up Is Fucked Up. That's fucked up.
So those people I mentioned in the webway, in the super deranged cults and the depraved people of the Eldar, in the webway they didn't quite get a hold onto them. Slaanesh has them, but it has them on by the pinky finger. And they're
Okay.
slowly being consumed by Slaanesh,
But not
they
quite.
found out they can stave her off by doing Slaanesh things. The Dark Eldar are by far the worst, most horrifying, disgusting, depraved, and brutal race
Does that
in
guy
all
just have
of
4 arms with
Warhammer
different
40k.
weapons
These
of
are
torture?
entirely a group of people whose full purpose to save their species from extinction,
He's doing
to
worse
go
and
into
worse
planets,
things.
raid them, and take as many slaves as they possibly can to torture them for 1, 5, 10, 20, a million.
So they literally go and take other people as the food for their existence, if they can constantly do bad things to people other than themselves, then they can continue to exist within the universe. A tribute, yeah, sounds like a good word.
Million years, because
But not
that
a tribute to
torture
Slaanesh.
will keep them from dying. They look very BDSM style too. They definitely have a lot more spiky bits and they have a lot more of that kind of leathery black look to them. But let's say you are an upstanding Imperial citizen living life on a regular planet. You get
Okay.
invaded by the Necrons. The Necrons will shoot you with a deatomizer and you will be destroyed in a millisecond, and that's it. Not the worst way to go. You are invaded by Chaos
okay, I like this
Marines
example.
or something.
What will they do?
You take a bolter shot to the head or a
you get rammed
sword
through,
across your
'cause they ran
stomach
so fast
you
and
get
right
cut in
through you.
half. Painful, but not the worst.
Kind of
the Orks
vaporized
arrive.
instantly.
They beat you to death. Hurts, but whatever. Tyranids, they eat you alive. It's pretty rough. The Dark Eldar. This is going to get a little graphic. I apologize.
Okay.
You pray you die. You don't. You are instead taken as a human slave. Your life will be endless work and agony.
So this is like the Legion in
24/7.
Fallout.
They will make sure you can't not die, as your pain satisfies them. They will hook you up to all manner of torture devices. They will inject
This is like-
pain-based
this is
stimuli
why
drugs
Griffith was
directly
born.
into your nervous system. They will slowly run razor blades across your skin.
I
They
understand
will
now, Griffith.
fillet you and just pull out your teeth and your fingernails one by one. They will remove your appendages and your skin and wait for it to grow back so they can do it again.
I hope
They
you
will
heard that
murder
screaming.
and torture and use the R word, it rhymes with grape, your entire family in front of you and do the
no.
exact same thing to them. You yourself will also be rhymes with grape anywhere and everywhere possible. And this will occur for 20 years until you are no longer satisfying to them. And then
Really?
you will be
It takes
contorted,
20 years to get bored of
crushed,
us?
and twisted into some form of trophy, a fleshy trophy, or a ring,
It's like
or a
Uzumaki all
couch,
over again.
or a TV stand, or perhaps a wonderful hat, while you are, of course, still alive and breathing. And you will become a moaning, fleshy trophy for eternity.
Oh.
And that is what happens when you are taken by the Dark Eldar. They are the most depraved,
Messed
most
up.
horrifying race in all of 40k.
Interesting, but messed
They
up.
look the part, and they do it so they all don't die. They are literally forced to do this, because if they don't, Slaaneish's grip will get harder, and they will have their souls pulled away. So long as they keep doing this, Slaanesh is like, "You're doing good, man. You're doing solid. You keep that shit up, you elf-eared bastards." That's the Dark Eldar. That's the Drukhari. They are horrible. On the tabletop,
So
they're
don't encounter
actually
them.
kind of like Eldar, but more extreme. They are even
Oh, see,
squishier than the Eldar.
they seem
but
like they would
hit
be fun to
generally
paint.
even harder. Fast
like their
attack,
close scheme.
skirmishers, really quick, speedy, like get around them, do a lot of damage, get away kind of stuff. That's mostly the Dark Eldar. Look at the definition of grim.
What is the purpose for Eldar to exist on the tabletop for a battle if they just seem to like not want to put themselves in scenarios where they could possibly die, like because they're trying to avoid being eaten by Slaanesh? They seem to be like doing all these other sort of more crafty techniques to like keep themselves living forever. Why even fight? They only fight if they have to. I wonder what kind of puts them in that scenario.
Grim Dark in a dictionary, you'll find a picture of the Dark Eldar and Sev from Republic Commando. A quote
I don't
from
understand that reference.
Mr. Vecht. "We are the lords of despair, masters of terror. Dread and agony are our
So
meat
are they
and
worse than
wine,
Night Lords?
and they are plentiful indeed." Dark Eldar. Let's talk about the Harlequins. The
Oh.
clowns.
What's the matter, Andy? Don't you want to have some fun?
The Harlequins are a
Take that
bizarre
image
race of
away.
Eldar. They're demonic clown performers.
No.
They're like a weird mix of Sander Cohen from BioShock
Is he playing
and
Wet
Jin
Nurse
from League of
music?
Legends, but in a mix of
Which music did you start there?
What's the matter, Andy? Don't you want to have some fun?
The Harlequins are
Yep. It's Murgo's Lullaby. I thought I heard that. This is terrible. I don't do not like. It's like wrong in so many different ways. Why you gotta make them even creepier?
a bizarre race of Eldar. They're demonic clown performers. They're like a weird mix of Sander Cohen from BioShock and Jin from League of Legends, but in a more clown
but Jin has a
theme.
reason
They're
for why he's like
artists
that.
of death and perfecters of their craft. They do not belong to Craft Worlds or any of the weird Drukhari people. They guard something called the Black Library, which is this giant
Oh, there's
tome of
actually a
never-ending
Black
knowledge
Library?
deep in the heart of the Eldar webway, and also guarded by their god named Kegorok, I believe is how you pronounce his name. He is the laughing god, but it's the Eldar's laughing god, and these are the Harlequins, the Harlequin clowns. These are Eldar clowns, okay? So imagine the things that an Eldar, these depraved individuals, would find funny, and this is the god of that. It's a horror clown. These are gods of horror for us normal people. For them,
don't
they're like,
like-
oh, it's so funny. They're all dying horribly. Honk, honk. They're very bizarre and difficult to describe. They've escaped the ruinous powers of Slaanesh somehow, but their main thing is guarding that Black Library, and the Harlequins just... They're demon clown performers. They're barely any models on the tabletop.
Yeah, they're strange. They almost feel like out of place on the tabletop with like their appearance. But I guess they gotta look legally distinct from everyone else. Like this one even has like a mohawk.
They're good in melee. They're demon clowns. I'm not sure. I got a quote. "It is too easy for an Eldar to embrace the obscene virtues of chaos, for Slaanesh is nothing more than a manifestation of the Eldar mind in its most wild and unconstrained form. Human morality is meaningless to the Eldar, and to the dark side of the Eldar mind, all life is to be expended at a whim. Cruelty and generosity are but
typo
the
there.
impulse of a moment. Beauty and sensuality are virtues that can be expressed in bloodshed just as easily as in song. To an unfettered Eldar mind, there is neither sanity nor madness, but merely a wave of perfect existence fulfilled by its own savage momentum. They're very strange. The Harlequins, Drukhari, Eldar, they are an anomaly that make humans seem completely easy to understand in comparison.
Yeah,
they range
I
from
agree.
rekindling their civilization to horrifying murder and also clowns. They're all over the place, but honestly, they represent quite well and are rather interesting, especially with the whole Slanesh murdering everyone bit. So, yeah, Eldar. Now, bugs.
At least,
Mom, they following me, Mom.
at least if like they're to be like the last stranglers of the Elder Society, might as well make them interesting, right? Tyranids, yay! Let's eat things. I think I could resonate with these ones the most. I too want to devour everything all the time.
They following me.
These, the bugs.
The Tyranids.
The bugs, they're following
Now,
us.
you want to talk something a lot more fun, a little more simple than all this crazy Eldar shenanigans?
they have a
Let's talk
singular
the
purpose.
Tyranids. They're bugs. Do they look like Zerg? Hell yeah, they look like Zerg. You want to know why they look like Zerg? Because they were actually supposed to be what Zerg were. Apparently
What is
StarCraft was
Zerg?
supposed to be a 40k game in the beginning, hence why they look so much like Eldar, Zerg, and the Imperium of Man. Like,
Oh, I didn't. I mean, I know that there's a connection to StarCraft, to Warhammer, but I didn't realize this Zerg. Yeah, okay, so they're just like, are they a race? Are they a group of people?
kind of Space Marine-y. Those Marines, huh? They look a little bit Space Marine-y to me.
They do.
Maybe. I don't know. You really
Zerg is a
fucked
race
up
like
on
Tyranids,
that one,
okay.
Games Workshop, didn't ya? Tyranids are a giant
They lost the rights to
infestation
StarCraft.
of unfathomable proportions. These are giant, extremely bio-advanced hive mind organisms that are basically all about absorbing as much biomass as they possibly can to evolve and mutate to be extremely potent and powerful and kill and eat anything in their path. They are probably the least evil faction in all of 40k because all they
agree.
want to do is eat shit. They want to nom nom the entire galaxy. They
No
hangry
prejudice.
and we food.
No
Also,
racism.
this Tyranid hive mind has a presence
We are literally
in the
food
warp.
source.
In fact, Tyranids in their own right have a massive presence in the warp. They have a thing called the shadow in the warp specifically, where when they are coming in to invade a planet, they have this weird ability to kind of cut off the warp on all the psychers on that planet. And how do you get help across the stars? Well, you need the warp because you need that for interstellar travel.
So literally, if let's say, is that why we couldn't communicate with people in Space Marine 2? That's why the Astropath was so important? That's why we had to go into them to like talk and like send a message that we need help, otherwise we'd have to do Exterminatus? Ooh. Well, that's a really handy little ability. I didn't think that this was like something that they could just do anywhere.
So, with people unable to call for help from the Tyranids, these
Amazing
are
ability.
easy pickings. And an entire giant Tyranid hive fleet comes out of orbit and just will massacre, absorbing all that biomass and turning them and all of their other Tyranids into even more advanced monsters. They come in so many varieties too, all based on what is important. Tiny little ripper swarms for scouting and having little dudes eat people up, to the Hormigons, Termagants, and Gene Stealers,
Oh, yeah, I remember
all the
those.
way to the Hive Guard and the Exocrines and the Swarm Lord, to Hive Tyrants and their giant battle fleets, and even something as crazy as the Hierophant Bio Titan. The Tyranids come in all forms and sizes.
I will say I am surprised that Tyranids do have like a fighting unit that does have swords. It doesn't feel like it's kind of necessary if you can just kind of consume whatever it is you're about to fight rather than fight it itself.
Depending on what they require, they are extremely good at
But they did have
anti-biological
guns.
weaponry. There is no way you can plague them.
Maybe it's
or
easier to
blight
eat your
them.
food if they're
They have
dead.
extremely strong armor, carapaces and such. Tyranids are nigh perfect organisms and are pretty spooky when it comes down to how they handle all of their genetic material. Keep feeding them, they'll keep evolving. They keep on creating new horrifying organisms to spread across the galaxy. And you want to know what the most terrifying part of the Tyranids is?
Do you like, if you are the Tyranid that ate the most, like, souls within the universe, are you the biggest and most evolved form? You need to kill to eat it, so big sword arms. I mean, some of them just engulf people whole.
We might be surrounded. There have been like around 6 or 7 Tyranid hive
That's a really
fleets.
low-res map.
Behemoth, Kronos, all these different kinds of hive fleets. And they've all arrived in the galaxy from different points. Different sections of the Milky Way
Interesting.
galaxy
What does that say
have
about the
had
Tyranids?
different Tyranids come through. And that is horrifying. Because as far as we know, we could just be surrounded on all sides by Tyranids. The only reason you may not hear a whole lot about Tyranids is because it's a little bit hard to have a bunch of story off of one hive mind genocidal monsters. All these giant bugs swarming in, killing and eating everybody and evolving. Well, I mean, as cool as there are, there's some cool characters, the Swarm Lord, Old One Eye. You can't really have a whole bunch of major character-based stories around them. As awesome as they are, they're simple. They want to eat you. They want to eat you and absorb your biomass.
True, you
They
can
are
only have the
simple
perspective of those that
bugs.
get
If you want
eaten by
something a little more
Tyranids.
complex, talk gene stealer cults.
I can have all the pot I want, I get around faster than walking, and wherever I need a seat, I can just sit on my balls.
Gene stealer cults are a
Okay, before we dive into gene stealer cults, they look like humans? Maybe they're not humans. Tyranids can basically melt their own units into biofuel and transport them that way. Can they reconstitute them later as well? There's always another squad up to something during the campaign, and you can play their minions or their missions. Ooh, okay. For Space Marine 2, I'm guessing.
special brand of Tyranid that can slowly infect themselves into different kinds of society. And by infecting
They're
them, they can
Tyranids.
rise up to where they all pray and believe in these regular humans, pray and believe into their Tyranid hive mind gods. And these brood lords and I think they're called patriarchs all can turn an entire world all based into gene stealers, and these are called gene stealer cults. An entire hive world of the Imperium can be turned into nothing but servants to the Tyranid masters just by infecting them and screwing with their genetic code a little bit.
Wait, so you're telling me that Tyranids can come to a planet and infect all of them to basically like serve them and steal genes? They have bioform called gene stealers. They infect people, hence stealing genes, gene stealers. But like, are these infected people then, or are they Tyranids? They infect and prep for noms. They prepare the planet for invasion. So gene stealer can show up and start basically saying, hey, we're about to come and eat you next. Like they can go to Earth and do that. And rewrite the DNA of people. Why would they want to rewrite the DNA of people?
What's in the fucking box?
What do they get out of that? Over generations, the firstborn of each family infected becomes a hybrid creature until the 4th generation, by which is a pure strain gene stealer. These are often killed on sight at first. So you're telling me the hive can produce something that looks like that, and this is what can die first in a fight? They make them more effective killers. They can evolve claws and stuff like that. Any subsequent children born are considered brood brothers, and they are connected to the synaptic chatter of the Tyranids. So they take control of law enforcement, military, government, and make it ready. So when Tyranids show up, there's a conquered planet ready to and willing to be eaten. So they don't have to do the hard work. Interesting. Genius.
They also have this cool like Mad Max look, which is really neat. They are definitely one of the bigger threats to the Imperium besides Chaos. I keep saying biggest threat to the Imperium. They're up there though, because you, dingus, stepped on a bug in middle school. Asshole. There is a cancer eating at the Imperium.
Oh no.
With each decade, it advances
See,
deeper,
this is
leaving
why we're
drained,
doomed.
dead
'Cause you
worlds
stepped
in
on a
its
bug.
wake. This horror, this abomination, has thought and purpose that functions on an unimaginable galactic scale. And all we can do is to try to stop the swarms of bioengineered monsters it unleashes upon us by instinct. We have given the horror a name to salvage our fears. We call it the Tyranid race. But if it is aware of us, it must know us as nothing but prey. Tyranids, they're cool.
So,
But are
Space
they as cool as the
Marines.
Orks?
Oh, war!
That means I'm super fast.
Orks, 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 orks,
Nice.
orks, orks,
He's
orks,
very
orks,
excited about
orks.
orks.
Orks. I fucking love orks. So, yeah.
Hold on, we need a breather before we dive into this. War! Scream more. Space Marines. Wait, that didn't come out very well. Space Marines. Let's go.
Yes, the green monsters, the green tide, the green skins. These orcs, they are in fact a race in 40k. The orcs are as exactly what you expect.
At least they're very
they have
simple-minded.
archaic weapons, they're big boys, they have axes, and they have got big old teeth, and they want to kill everything, and there are so many of them. The only reason they haven't taken over the entire galaxy
they're
is they can't
fungal or
stop
something,
murdering
right?
each other. Orcs are so cool.
They're so
Orcs
disorganized.
don't have philosophy. Orcs don't have existential
Dude, the
crisis.
pirate one.
What matters is who's the
Didn't
biggest
we
orc.
face
You listen
him?
to that guy because he the biggest orc. He big orc. Big orc knows best. You
Big
win the
orc
power
knows
of
best. I like
imagination.
that.
Of all the races I have battled throughout the galaxy, the orc is the hardest to comprehend. They wage war with machines that should not work, care little for strategic gains, and are just as likely to slaughter each other as the enemy. How does one battle an enemy that defies all logic? As an orc, you're enjoying life. You're enjoying the life you're given. Your
You're
whole
enjoying
life
carnage
and
and
purpose is
war
to
and
get
battle.
up and beat each other to death
I
because
like
you
Vikings.
can. The biggest orc is the man who understands everything. He is the boss. And orcs have this really weird, like, big, dumb, stereotype British accent, which is just hilarious to me. Those are orcs. You fight. You like to fight. Your whole purpose is to fight. You wage war because you want to wage war. You got your boss
do they
over
have a
there, and
reason?
you
Do they
better
have a
listen
goal
to
at
the boss.
all?
'Cause
No
if you don't
mission
listen
or
to the boss,
purpose?
the boss will squish you and make you an example for the other orcs, and then you can't fight because orc dead. And orc dead can't fight because orc dead. Orcs.
Did they go to
They
Valhalla?
scrap together machines out of parts that don't make any sense, and because they believe, they have the mental imagination that that machine will run, it'll run. If that machine's out of gas, you're driving that machine with your fellow orcs, and the biggest orc is behind the wheel, and you run out of gas, some orc behind you is like, oh, Zog, we're out of gas. And the big orc is like, no, we're not. I filled the fucking gas tank up earlier. And all the other orcs are like, oh yeah, you did do that. And then you turn
just like the
the
mafia.
fucking mech back on, and it works again. Does it have gas? Probably not, but it works.
'Cause
The
you
power
willed
of
it.
Imagination. They paint things red because it makes them think they goes faster. They paint things purple because it's the sneakiest color. You want to know why? You ever seen a purple orc? Didn't fucking think so. Orcs are also like ancient as hell. They're back in the
Okay, that's amazing. I still like my favorite part about them is they just like will things into existence. What do you mean the car no work? Car work good. And then it just works. I need to be an orc. Forget the admechs. Forget praying to the Omnissiah and using WD-40 and having little incense sticks. No, we just gotta be orc. Cause big orc good. And I could just put on muscle and be the biggest and then just will whatever I want in existence even though it doesn't make sense. Because yes, that's how it works. I love that the reason that the God Emperor may still exist is that orcs haven't decided if he's dead or not. Wait, what? Wait, what do the orcs have to do with the Emperor? You're kind of buying into their ideals. Yeah, it's good propaganda, I agree, Jen. Their currency is teeth, so if you're a poor, you just beat up a small orc and steal his teeth. But then what if they're tiny teethies? Do you need bigger teethies than the tiny teethies? The tiny teethies can't be worth as much as the bigger teethies. The way orcs speak was based on football hooligans. They were just made by the old ones to fight, that's it. Fight for them, though? Or just fight? Like I can imagine Korn making them because he's like, if they wage war, then they get more blood, right? Blood for the blood god and skulls for the skull throne. Isn't that how it works? Orcs all generate a tiny, low-level psychic field. If enough of them believe something, that's the same that manifests. So it's kind of like hive mentality, but not, but just because of the structure and order of like the way things work within the orcs. The funniest thing about orcs is they're by far the most powerful race and they can take over the whole universe almost effortlessly, but they're too busy killing each other and being idiots, yeah. I mean, they have to have a downfall, right? Or something that makes them, like, you can't make something that strong, ultimately. They gotta have a downside. They fight oh yeah, right, they were made to fight the Necrons. But they also fight the humans. Orcs constantly generate new teeth throughout their life. Orc teeth also break down over time when removed from their mouths. This means no orc can ever be poor or rich for too long. Oh, there's a balance with even their society.
Dari time frame. But back then they were called Orks, and they were much larger
Orcs?
and scarier and
Not
far more
orcs.
intelligent. Now they're just orcs, and they're big, dumb, and they smack things. But they're pretty spooky. They're not very well armored, but they hit really hard, and it's called the Green Tide because there are so many orcs. There are about as many orcs as there are Tyranids. Maybe more. Who knows? But they
Dang.
keep on, murdering each other, so it's not too bad of an issue.
Yeah,
Orcs
I mean,
are entirely...
They have like basically, what do you call it? Like population control built into it, but they don't even need to think about it. They just are. They're just, it's harmonic for stupid reasons. It makes sense.
Comic relief. Their stuff is slapped together. That makes no sense. Their vehicles don't work
so
the way they're supposed to,
amazing.
but they work.
Like, I love that. Like, they're not sitting there and they're like freaking reading a manual of like how this furniture fits together because they need to make sure that they assemble it and they don't leave 5 screws behind. If an orc finds 5 screws behind, they're like, works, doesn't matter. Like, doesn't need 5 screws, doesn't need 5 screws. It works just fine as it is. And they don't even need to like follow the instructions. They're like, I think this doohickey goes here and that goes there and that looks pretty here. Paint that red, slap that on there. And you have a car, but it looks nothing like a car. It doesn't even have wheels. How is it gliding? How's it moving? Orcs build IKEA shelves with no manual, but does it look like a shelf? Orc believes it looks like a shelf, but no one else understands it's shelf.
Because they think it works, because they imagine that it works. Orcs care only about who is the biggest orc, and they will follow the biggest orc. And then if they want to be the biggest orc, they'll challenge the biggest orc. And then when they go and they issue a wah is just war in orc. They murder everybody and everything.
Put your heart into it, Bricky.
Of green orcs who are just excited to be hitting something. They don't care that they're hitting Eldar or the Imperium or Tau or anyone in between. They're just so they get to beat shit up. That's
What's
orcs.
eating that human?
And on the tabletop, they are a total coin flip.
Yeah,
and
they
really
do look fun.
I have never met a salty
color
orc
scheme.
player. I have never met someone who plays orcs and is ever just a bad guy or
you hear that, Gorka?
guy. Orc players
just
have
cool
this kind of fun to them because when you play them, you are completely submitting yourself to RNG. So here's the thing. Guardsmen, Imperial Guardsmen, when they shoot, they roll a dice, and on a 4 up, they'll hit their target. They have a 50% chance. Space Marines, pretty good. They hit on a 3 or higher because they're well trained.
Okay.
Adeptus Custodians, they hit on
probably 2 or
2s
higher.
they're
Yeah.
super well trained.
Sure.
Orcs, they hit on a 5 or higher. But if they roll a 6, they get to make another shot with anything. From the dinkiest pistol to the biggest rocket launcher.
Oh,
it doesn't
dang.
matter. Half of their stuff will blow up on a
But what
whim.
if you don't hit to 5 or 6?
One of their medics, if you roll a 1 to heal someone, you fuck up your surgery and you just kill an orc. They're so wacky and silly. But the thing is if you roll well, you roll high, and you keep rolling high, you are going to crush people.
I will say that orcs in like the universe of like tabletop games, if you had to like role play it, or if you had to play it in Dungeons and Dragons, and you would just have so much fun rolling the dice and seeing what stupid outcomes happen at work. Like, this is the race that gives you like giggles and laughs, you know, just because like all this stupid stuff happens.
And if you don't, you lose. I mean, that's what you get when you play orcs. That's what happens when you play orc. It's a coin flip. Which is why you can't be a salty bitch when you play orcs, because
I like the color scheme too.
It's just the roll of the dice.
Whites,
You're playing a
reds,
dice game.
greens.
But if you're gonna have fun and you want to be stupid and you want to be silly, you're gonna play some damn orcs. But on the opposite side of the fun part of this, let's talk about the Necrons.
The anti-fun. And then you be ending strong with the Tau because no one likes the Tau. Is that why he's left it at the end of the video? In case anyone, just doesn't make it to the end, they haven't learned about the Tau. Because he has strong opinions about the Tau and those that like the Tau. Because of a genetic hardwiring, orcs are the perfect society. They can never die out. They don't know poverty. Live for fun. That sounds like a great time. I think orcs would be my favorite if they had more muscle mummies. Wait, are there no woman orcs? I don't think I've seen one concept. They're genderless. Okay, well, no, that's okay. I can see that from like a human perspective where you're just like, oh, they call each other boys. Most of our orcs special weapons have RNG roll tables for them. Like if you roll high, it hits hard, but it can't break armor. But if you roll low, it isn't strong, but ignores all armor. Smart. Your friend likes a Tau. Why are you still friends with them? For God's sake, I thought that was
spooky,
my...
scary skeletons and very grim
That
dark.
triggered me so hard because I thought that was my 6-month sub alert. The E1M1, I will never be able to hear that sound again in my life without thinking it's my sub alert.
Again, they have a much more fleshed out lore than before. Back in the day, they were just undead Egyptian space terminators, and they still look that way, but now they actually have a story. So way back in the
Necrons
day,
kinda
we
have
had
a
the
cool
Necron
story.
tier. Kind of see a theme here: Eldari, Eldar, Krork, Ork, Necron, Necron tier. So the Necron
I
tier
don't see the
were this
trends.
race of generally kind of shitty people. Not
Yeah.
because they were personally shitty,
We learned that.
because their lives were awful. They were ill-fated to a horrible existence
No, they're
of
terrible.
like radiation and a terrible planet they lived on, and everything just really sucked. Being a Necron tier was just really depressing. They really were looking for immortality. They were extremely reliant on the hope that they would eventually find the key to living forever and just stave off this horrible nature that they were thrust upon them, and
Sure,
therefore they
but then
could
they became
become
evil.
the most dominant race in the galaxy. And they found this group. They're called the Old Ones. Imagine them kind of like the Forerunners in Halo or the Xel'Naga in
The
StarCraft,
Forerunners,
right?
heck 'em.
These Old Ones were these strong, pretty much omnipotent beings, and they, of course, knew the key to immortality. So the Necrons
they
went
wouldn't
to them
share.
and said, "Please, show us
They
your
went to the
ways."
star gods.
And the Old Ones said, "Piss off." Not really, they were a lot more humble about it, but they did not want to share their secret of immortality with the Necrons.
Fair, because then it would make them the only
Necrons,
gods
of
in the
course,
universe.
took this very well and waged war with them, kind of under this united banner. The Necron different dynasties didn't really like
I mean,
each
this
other,
is before
but
they
under
looked like this,
one
though.
man, the Silent King, he thought the best way to unite his race was to
Didn't
do
he
this
make a-
giant war with the Old Ones out of spite for them keeping the
pact with
secret of
Star Gods?
immortality to them. This was known as the War in Heaven, and this is actually like a multi-stage war, because during this War in Heaven, they discovered the Star Gods, a whole new race of people known as the Catan, or the Catan. These Star
That's
Gods
them.
were also very much like Old Ones, almost omnipotent beings, and they too had the key to immortality. And so the Necrons went to them and said, "Hey, can you help us fight
They
off
only
the
helped
Old
'cause they
Ones?
wanted something."
Can you help us kill these Old Ones, you, the Catan?" And the Catan said yes. And in fact, we can help provide you with the immortality you so desperately seek. So the Silent King of the Necrons decided to make a pact with the Catan to allow them to accept this
Sacrifice their
generous
bodies
gift
in the
of
process.
immortality upon them. But this, of course, had been a horrendous trap, and the Necrons were dragged in chains to this biotransference where their flesh was stripped from them, replaced with nothing but a metal hollow shell, as their souls were ripped from their body and fed to the Catan. And the Catan fattened up. They got chonk on the souls of the Necrons. As this was their plan all along, they consumed the flesh and souls of the Necron tier and turned them all
God.
into unwilling robotic slaves just to serve their will. And then, with their new-founded Necron army, they pointed their guns at the Old Ones, and the Catan continued their domination of the stars and their genocide, complete and full
See?
genocide
How are they
of
good?
these Old Ones. The Old Ones did their best to stave it off. They even created other races, the Eldari and the Orks, to try to fight off the horrifying Necron army and the Catan above them. But there was absolutely no possible chance for them. And the Old Ones were absolutely extinguished across the galaxy. Their entire race completely removed. Full on
So-
100% genocide.
There's no one that could potentially have the power to make things like Orks and Eldar ever again. All these like children are basically abandoned because no old gods. Can we? Is there maybe the lack of balance in Orks? Wait, what was I trying to say? Maybe the lack of balance for Orks and Eldar is what made them also just become like really messy races.
However, during all this, the Catan, so just infatuated with their victory, started fighting each other for fun, for sport, and
For
for small
funsies.
differences doesn't matter. The Catan, with these overpowered people,
They
they're gonna
realized how
eventually
much
hit
fun
each
they could
other at
have.
some point. And as they began just menially fighting each other, the Eldari and the Orks actually started pushing on the C'tan's borders a little bit, giving them a little bit of a run for their money. And as this continued, this is when the Silent King, who retained his consciousness, decided to leap into action and start a full-scale revolt against their C'tan masters.
So
and this
did some
revolt
people not
was
retain their conscience?
bloody, as the entire Necron army was surged off to destroy these star gods. They were able to, just after
contain them.
suffering horrendous losses, were able to turn the tide
Most
of the
of them
war.
didn't keep their consciousness,
And they took
okay.
these C'tan and they blasted them. Because as these star gods are unkillable, they were
ones
able
got
to
snuffed out
break
before they
them
could
into
issue a
thousands
balance
of
patch for
shards
orcs.
and entrap them in giant stasis vaults to now actually be slaves to the Necrons. And with the Necrons having the entirety of their old gods enslaved to them,
What a
they
twist of
realized
events.
that soon their race was about to be attacked by the overcoming new races, the Eldari and the Orks. And so what they did is they retreated into giant stasis tombs in order
which
to
we find
preserve
throughout
their
the
energy
universe.
and their strength for when one day they would be reawakened and they would be able to rule the galaxy that was rightfully theirs. And then some dingus Adeptus Mechanicus guy diddled with a green console, and now the Necrons are back and they see all these primitive races
Got
on their
awakened
lawns
early.
and they think, get the fuck off of it. The Necrons are back, super advanced, and they are here to reclaim the galaxy that they so rightfully believe is theirs. Now, on a tabletop, they're a lot like that. Tons of undead Egyptian skeleton robots that when they die, they just get right back up because they keep on reanimating. Hard to kill, tons of crazy stuff. You can
wow.
use the C'tan themselves
I didn't
as
realize they
units to
reanimated.
fight with. It's pretty cool.
Oh,
The
C'tans!
Necrons
Dang, they
are
use them in
one of
battle?
the three major events in 40k. The Horus Heresy, the Fall of the Eldar, and the Awakening of the Necrons are all
Oh,
pretty
dang.
substantial events.
I didn't realize the
And
fall
Necrons
of the
themselves are
Awakening of the
pretty dang
Necrons
cool
is
as
that
well.
important.
Here's a good quote from a wonderful Dawn of War game. Lucky creatures, as long last you have found the tranquility of death. I was like you once, clinging to life and blind to the truth. When I uncovered the truth, I too shuddered and paled with fear. Deep in these catacombs, I was remade. Here, my brethren slumbered for eons while the living grew like weed. My Lord knew this day would come. He had plans for us all. We would purge this world once more. So come, poor victims of life. We will grant you tranquility in these crypts. Kronos will be a tomb world once more. Necrons are also pretty smug.
I know about
Trace
tomb
in the
worlds.
Infinite especially. A little
Mr.
dickhead.
Steal Your
But
Girl?
speaking of dickheads, last race. Let's talk the Tau.
The preface of that. He had to whip out an insult before the Tau Empire even like begun, the chapter even begun. He's really trying to color our impressions of the Tau Empire, or he's trying to say something about people who don't like the Tau.
The exact formation of the Tau Empire is not entirely understood. However, the exact
I get the reference. I get the reference. It's supposed to be the weeb legs, isn't it?
formation of the Tau Empire is not entirely understood. However, a long time ago, many thousands of years ago, in the 40k world that is, some Imperial navigation vessels were going around through different areas, and they saw a primitive race, blue people, smacking each other with sticks and stones. They thought, nah, dumb Xenos race, who gives a shit, and they bailed. Then this giant warp storm occurred right in that major area, unable to be breached. Then, once that warp storm 6,000 years later subsided, hello, those little sticks. Well, they decided to actually have no war of any kind and all just unite together under one flag of the Tau Empire. And now they have
kind of handy.
gigantic starships and Gundam robots and lasers and railguns and mechs, and they are here to ruin your day for the greater good. That is generally the Tau Empire.
But
They
what's
have
their
this kind of
purpose?
feeling of this homogenous group. All species can go underneath the banner of the greater good. The greater good is their idea of the fundamental increase and help of all. In fact, they are most
want
likely
to
the
help
most
people?
like the Covenant in Halo, where they have the overarching prophets, being the ethereals, who are actually kind of dicks and like to pull at strings a little bit.
I
but then you
agree.
have all these different races directly underneath them, and they all work together in this big group as this large, foreboding race that tries to spread their weirdly pseudo-religious influence across the galaxy. The alien is not intrinsically evil. Do not hate him. Pity him, his ignorance. Seek to understand his differences and equate him with his inadequacies. Only then will he accept his place in the greater good. That is...
Can like a human accept to become Tau or work within the Tau Empire or something like that? There's space waifus to spread love and joy under the shadow of some bad ideas. Oh, I didn't know that anyone could become Tau.
Generally the Tau. And if you're kind of wondering like what their mainly big shtick is, well, they're all about big robots and mechs. They have laser rifles and rail guns. They got giant mechs with tons of missile pods and heavy rail rifles and rail guns and burst cannons and ion accelerators and void shields and all this stuff. And that is generally what the Tau's all about. But you're probably thinking, Bricky, this doesn't sound that evil.
Yeah.
This doesn't sound very grim, dark Warhammer. And you'd be right. The Tau Empire really don't have that much of a horrifying, grim, dark style like everybody else. They're much more younger, new age thing. In fact,
maybe they just haven't been affected by all the horrors of the world.
Even better than they are now back in the day because they liked having like that good guy faction. But a lot of us who really like the dark, depressing style of Warhammer didn't really like it that much.
The Tau, I guess, doesn't fit in.
The Tau get a lot of hate, and a lot of that hate isn't necessarily unjustified. It's mainly from a tabletop perspective, but as you can see from all the visuals I've shown you recently, they don't really fit in the 40k universe very well. They lack that super...
When were the Tau introduced into the Warhammer 40k universe? Are they like a recent addition, or have they always existed within the Warhammer 40k universe? As long as they have been writing about it. They tried to turn a space marine and didn't turn out well. Who died? Well, volunteer soldiers are called Cuevasa. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Early 2000s. The first gen hippies, not seeing enough war and yet to be jaded. Yeah, they still think that they can like remedy the world and fix everything. Yeah, they do kind of look a little bit out of place just because their faction doesn't have like that gritty medieval vibe as well. They do feel very futuristic. Even in comparison to Necrons.
Dark, dramatic, kind of high gothic level the Imperium has. They don't have the weird kind of like grungy stuff that Chaos or say the Orks do. And the Necrons and the Eldar have their own specific style as well. The Tau really do look like something out of Gundam. And while it isn't necessarily a bad thing, it does definitely not fit too well.
Geometry,
there's that.
It's very
There's
sharp.
also the tabletop problem. In tabletop, Tau are horrible at melee combat, but exceptionally good at range combat. So they blast everyone from really, really far away, and they have a million rules to make it so that it's nearly impossible for you to get into melee combat. So it basically just forces you to
makes it not
the
fun.
game into one specific gameplay style, which is
if you're
gun
Tau,
to gun.
you just win.
And if you're doing gun to gun, they're going to win every time because they're the Tau, and the Tau are really damn good at shooting. So it's one of those things
no
that
one
makes
wants to have Tau players at their board.
And a lot of different reasons for that, both
that
from
just
style
seems
and
like
such. But this is
problem
actually
with
one
how
of the
they-
things I wanted to end
the race
this
got
video
conceived in their
with,
guidelines.
is that the Tau, while they have their
Tabletop
issues,
wise.
you should not be discouraged from playing them. I'll make plenty of Tau weeaboo jokes, of course I will, but it's all generally in good fun. Anyone who legitimately doesn't want you to play a faction is an idiot, and you shouldn't be giving them the time of day. You pick what you think is cool and what you like. In Warhammer, especially now, factions get better and they get worse. They grow and then they fall. You should only be playing what you think is cool. You like the look, you like the models.
Base take.
If you're talking tabletop, that is what you should be going for every time, is what you think is badass, because things change all the time. But the universe of Warhammer has so much going for it. Every faction has something interesting, every character has a story, and there's a million stories to be told. The universe is vast and exciting, and while it is dark, depressing, and horrible, that is the damn charm. And out of everything I've told you in these two videos, if anything you could take away is the reason why so many of us are so into this series and why we like it so much.
Because it's diverse.
Because with so much
So I think we're
variety,
everyone.
such an expansive universe, and so much that can be done, you can find yourself having a pretty great time.
Oh, that was a lot to digest, but it did cover the other races of the Warhammer 40k universe. I will say, orcs are pretty cool. The Eldar are fun to learn about, but they're pretty freaky in a lot of different ways. Still interesting. I still think that the Emperor should reach out, bypass that xenophobia. Talk to the Eldar for a moment. What did we learn so far today? We learned that this universe is very messed up lit, and there's a lot of races, and they all have their part in it. That's what we learned today. It wasn't just the humans. I guess Warhammer 40k is constantly evolving, so there's always probably an emergence of races and, you know, more details added to them over time. Of course, there's the huge tabletop element, but like within the stories that are probably written over time. I don't even know how many Warhammer 40k books come out a year. Maybe only one. Maybe it's not even once a year. So it feels like probably as this like universe develops itself, like things might change and might things make more interesting. I would say my opinion probably hasn't really changed either about me liking the Battle Sisters, but the orcs are fun. They're like silly fun, and they look really cool to paint as well. If I had to paint them, they look like fun, and yeah, they're just silly. So you have like a bit of a love for orcs. I mean, who can't love a good orc, right? Right?